Adrian Wolfe had spent most Christmas Eves locked behind glass towers and glittering stages shaking hands with investors who pretended to care and smiling for cameras that captured nothing of the man he truly was. Tonight should have been no different. The annual Wolfe Aerospace Winter Gala filled the ballroom of the Crestview Hotel with champagne and sequins and music loud enough to drown out any lingering sense of loneliness. But not even the 1,000 blinking lights hanging from the ceiling could hide the exhaustion pulling at Adrian's features when he slipped out the side door and into the cold Manhattan night. Snow drifted across the streets in slow spirals, coating East Village in a quiet that felt almost sacred. Adrian walked without knowing where he was going. His tuxedo jacket hung open, his breath fogged in the air. His hair was damp from melted flakes. Yet the cold did not bother him. Nothing did any more. Not since Lena. 2 years had passed since the accident at the aerospace testing facility. 2 years since the explosion. 2 years since his wife had been taken from him by a contractor mistake that was never fully explained. 2 years of silence in a mansion meant for 2 people. 2 years of going through motions that never led him anywhere. The city noises seemed to muffle around him as he crossed Avenue B, moving through small clusters of people carrying brightly wrapped gifts. From afar, he looked like any other wealthy man sick of holiday parties. Up close, his eyes told another story. He had not slept in days. He had not eaten properly in weeks. He no longer recognized the version of himself reflected in gold-tinted windows. Adrian kept walking until the music from the gala faded completely, until the doormen and flashing photographers were just distant memories swallowed by the snow. A warm, amber glow spilled onto the sidewalk from a small bar tucked between a record store and a laundromat. The sign read Moonrise Tavern in chipped silver paint. It was everything the gala was not. Quiet, unpolished, human. Adrian stepped inside. The air was thick with cinnamon-baked apples and the low hum of an old Christmas song. Only a handful of customers sat scattered along the bar. A couple whispered to each other in a corner booth. A delivery driver warmed his hands with a cup of coffee. No one recognized him. For the first time in months, he could breathe. He chose an empty table near the back where the dim yellow lights cast gentle shadows across the wood. He removed his jacket and loosened his tie, his movements slow, as if every action carried the weight of unspoken grief. His hands trembled when he pressed his palms against his eyes. The world felt unbearably heavy. Mira Thompson noticed him before she even approached. She had learned to read people during long shifts. Some customers were tired, some angry, some celebrating. But this man radiated something different. Something cracked. Something barely holding together. Mira had seen loneliness before, but never like this. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy braid. Her apron was dusted with flour from the apple pies she helped the bartender reheat. She had been working double shifts for weeks to cover her mother's medical bills. Her feet hurt. Her eyes were heavy, but she never dismissed anyone who looked like they needed kindness. So she wiped her hands on her apron, picked up a glass of water out of habit, and crossed the room. When she reached his table, he lifted his gaze. His eyes were rimmed red, not from alcohol, but from something deeper, something worn from time and sorrow. Mira offered a gentle smile. "Can I get you anything?" The question should have been simple. It should have ended there. But Adrian looked at her like she was the first person who had spoken to him honestly in years. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, struggling for words. She waited. Finally, he exhaled, fragile and strained. "Could you sit and talk with me just for 5 minutes?" Mira blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Customers flirted occasionally. Some sought company. Some rambled drunkenly. But this was different. His voice held no flirtation, no expectation, no ulterior motive. Only desperation. Only aching human loneliness. Adrian lowered his eyes, suddenly aware of how strange his request sounded. "I apologize," he murmured. "I should not have asked that. I'm sorry." Mira studied him. He did not look dangerous. He did not look drunk. He looked like a man who had been carrying too much for far too long. Her instinct whispered that he needed someone to simply sit with him. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "You have 5 minutes," she said softly. His shoulders sagged with relief as if the simple presence of another person eased the invisible weight pressing down on him. For a moment, neither spoke. Snow tapped softly against the window beside them. The bar's faint holiday lights flickered. The world seemed to slow into a gentle stillness. Adrian finally whispered, "Thank you." Mira folded her hands on the table. "You look like someone who has had a hard night." He swallowed. "Hard year. Hard couple of years." His voice cracked at the end. Mira nodded with quiet understanding and waited for him to continue giving him space he had not realized he needed. Adrian looked at her again. For the first time in 2 years, he let a stranger see the grief he had buried so deeply he feared it might consume him. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft glow of Christmas lights and the muffled sounds of the bar, the night he broke finally began. Mira Thompson had learned to live in the in-between spaces of New York, the ones where people hurried past without looking, where rent was high and hope felt like a luxury item only wealthy neighborhoods could afford. By daylight, she worked part-time as a cashier in a small grocery store on East 3rd, scanning items while forcing smiles that sometimes felt more exhausting than the work itself. By night, she served drinks at the Moonrise Tavern, memorizing regular orders and offering kindness to strangers who needed it more than the tips they left behind. She never complained. Complaining did not pay medical bills. Her mother, once a vibrant theater costume maker, now relied on Mira for everything. After a sudden neurological condition made simple tasks difficult. Some days her mother remembered how to thread a needle. Some days she forgot her own address. Mira carried all of it quietly because that was the only way life moved forward. She lived in a small, walk-up apartment with peeling paint along the windowsill. The hallway smelled of burnt toast and laundry detergent. Their heater rattled loudly every night, threatening to give up, but never quite doing so. Mira patched things together the way she patched her emotions, never letting anything completely fall apart. Her world was small but real. And despite everything, she still believed in the goodness of people. She still believed in meaning, even when meaning felt thin as paper. Across the city, Adrian Wolfe lived inside a world so expansive it felt suffocating. His penthouse overlooked the skyline, its walls made of glass and steel, its furniture minimal and modern. Every object was curated by designers. Every room echoed with silence. The kitchen counters were spotless, untouched by the warmth of cooking. The living room displayed awards and aerospace models' achievements celebrated by colleagues and investors, but none of it held the warmth of the life he once shared with Lena. He had built an empire on innovation. Wolfe Aerospace was the reason the private shuttles had become feasible. His brilliance had been praised as visionary. Yet within these walls, he was only a man haunted by unanswered questions. Every night he walked past the piano Lena used to play. He never touched it. Every morning he glanced at the ring she had given him during their anniversary trip to Yosemite, still resting on the bedside table where she had left it. He never moved it. Everything in the penthouse remained in the exact place it had been the night before she died, as if changing anything would erase the last traces of her existence. He wore his grief like invisible armor, polished and impenetrable. The world saw him as untouchable. In reality, he was unraveling thread by thread. When Mira sat across from him in that dimly lit bar, their worlds collided not with sparks, but with quiet recognition. Neither knew what to say at first. Adrian kept his eyes on his hands, noticing the faint tremor he had tried to hide all night. Mira did not push him. She let the silence settle, knowing sometimes silence was an invitation to speak. When he finally did, his voice was low. "I have not talked to anyone honestly in months." Mira tilted her head slightly. "Why me?" He blinked as though he had not expected the question. "Because when you asked if I wanted anything, you looked at me like a person, not like a headline, not like a walking wallet, not like an opportunity, just a person." She absorbed that quietly. Most customers barely looked at her when ordering. Most glanced through her like she was decoration. Yet this man with a name plastered across tech magazines and financial news looked at her as if moments of gentleness were the rarest currency in the world. Mira brought him a warm drink after a moment, not because he ordered it, but because she sensed he needed something grounding. The cinnamon steam curled into the air between them. Adrian wrapped his hands around the mug as though reclaiming the ability to feel warmth. Outside, the snow thickened, turning the street into something soft and blurred. Inside the bar, lights flickered between gold and amber, reflecting off the glass bottles behind the counter. A man at the bar, drunk to the point of slurring, noticed Mira speaking to Adrian and stumbled over. "Hey, sweetheart," he muttered. "My drink has been empty for 5 minutes." Mira kept her tone patient. "I will be right with you." Adrian straightened, slightly alert. The man leaned closer to Mira, invading her space. "Come on now. Why do you get to sit with him and not help me?" He smelled of whiskey and frustration. Mira forced a polite smile. "Please return to your seat." The man grumbled, reaching out as if to grab her arm. Adrian's chair scraped against the floor. His hand closed around the man's wrist firm without being aggressive. "She said she will help you shortly." The drunk man blinked, sobered by the warning in Adrian's steady voice, then backed away and returned to the bar. Mira let out a slow breath when the moment passed. "Thank you," he shrugged lightly. "I do not like seeing anyone treated badly." She studied him again and noticed something she had missed the first time she approached him. His pain was not loud. It was quiet, deep, and shaped by something irreversible. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer. "You look like someone who has not been asked if he is okay in a long time." Adrian's breath caught. No one had asked him that since Lena. For a moment he could not speak. Mira wondered if she had crossed a line, but the way he looked at her told her she had not. Something inside him broke and mended all at once. He exhaled slowly, as if releasing the weight of days he had carried alone. "Thank you," he said, unsure how else to respond. She nodded. "You seem like someone who keeps everything inside. Someone has to listen eventually." Adrian rubbed a hand over his face. "I did not plan to walk here, or to come inside, or to ask you to sit with me. I do not really know what I'm doing anymore." She smiled with the faintest curve of her lips. "Sometimes that is when we need people the most. 2 lives, 2 worlds, 1 table." And in the space of a single conversation they began to shift towards something neither could explain. The next minutes inside Moonrise Tavern unfolded quietly, almost tenderly, as if the world outside had been muted just long enough for 2 exhausted souls to breathe. Adrian spoke in small fragments, like someone gently testing how much truth his voice could hold without splintering. Mira listened with an attentiveness that came naturally to her, the kind born not from obligation but from empathy carved through years of hardship. It should have been a moment that disappeared into the night, known only to them, something soft and private in a city that rarely allowed softness to survive. But New York had a way of turning private moments into public spectacle, especially when the person at the table happened to be one of the most recognizable billionaires in the country. It began with a glow, a faint bluish light flickering just a few tables away. Mira did not notice at first, but Adrian's weary eyes shifted toward it, his muscles tensing almost imperceptibly. A young man, hardly 20, sat hunched over a phone recording a live stream for his small online following. He had been filming snippets of the bar all night, complaining about spending Christmas Eve alone, joking about the absurdity of New Yorkers still going out in a snowstorm. But then he looked toward the back of the tavern and stopped talking mid-sentence. His eyes widened as recognition dawned. "Dude!" he whispered into the mic as if confiding in thousands, though his live stream had only 20 viewers. "I think that is Adrian Wolfe." For a moment, the camera rested on Adrian sitting across from a waitress whose name the world did not yet know. The young man zoomed in slightly, catching Adrian's posture, the raw grief in his expression, the way he looked at Mira with a quiet desperation that could not be faked. It was not romantic. It was not scandalous. It was simply human, which was precisely why the internet would devour it. Mira continued talking softly, unaware of the lens pointed at them. Adrian rubbed his thumb along the rim of his mug, grounding himself in the warmth Mira provided. The live streamer whispered breathlessly, "He is talking to a waitress. On Christmas Eve. Holy hell, this is wild." Still filming, he rose from his seat pretending to head toward the restroom but angling his phone to get a better shot. Now he captured the full scene. The billionaire and the woman across from him, the dim lights creating a halo around them. The way Adrian leaned in slightly when Mira spoke. The moment that should have stayed between them. It took only seconds before screenshots were clipped and shared. The chat in the live stream was already exploding. Is he crying? Is she comforting him? Bro, is she his secret girlfriend? What is happening? The young man smirked at the attention. "This is insane," he whispered. "This is totally going viral." A new viewer typed in the chat, "Film closer." So he did. Too close. Mira finally noticed a shadow shifting near them. She turned her head just enough to see the phone held at a suspicious angle. Her stomach tightened. "Sir," she said gently, "please do not film customers." The live streamer shrugged with a grin. "It is a public place. Chill." Mira stepped forward slightly. "I am asking you nicely. Put the phone down." He rolled his eyes but obeyed for the moment. Yet the damage had already been done. Adrian lifted his gaze to Mira, a faint apology forming on his lips, though he had done nothing wrong. She offered a small, reassuring smile. "Do not mind him. People get bored on Christmas Eve." But something in Adrian's expression shifted, a subtle flicker of dread. He had lived long enough under the spotlight to know the cost of being seen at the wrong moment in the wrong frame. It had happened before. It always brought consequences. Mira tried to steer the night back to calm. She asked about his favorite Christmas memory. He hesitated, then spoke about Lena and the year they rented a cabin in Vermont where snow piled against the windows and she played the piano until sunrise. His voice wavered when he spoke her name, but the memory softened his features. Mira listened, offering quiet warmth. At that exact moment, the live streamer hit upload. 15 seconds. Captioned, "Lonely billionaire comforted by bar waitress on Christmas Eve." Within minutes, it spread from one platform to another, from 20 viewers to 100, from 100 to thousands. By the time Mira returned behind the bar to pick up new orders, the clip had already been reposted onto a popular gossip site. By morning, it would reach millions. But the night still felt calm for a little longer, long enough for Adrian to thank Mira for sitting with him, long enough for her to offer him a gentle, "You are not as alone as you think," long enough for him to believe it. They parted quietly when her break ended. Adrian slipped out into the falling snow without drawing attention. Mira watched him go with a feeling she could not name, then returned to wiping down the counter, unaware her life had already changed. She locked up the tavern at 2 a.m, walking home in the cold with her scarf pulled tight. The snow glistened beneath streetlights. Everything felt peaceful. She never imagined the peace would last only a few hours. At 6:30 the next morning, Mira was jolted awake by loud knocks against the apartment door. She rushed from her bed, heart pounding, thinking something had happened to her mother. When she opened the door, flashes blinded her. Photographers crowded the hallway shouting questions. "Mira Thompson. Are you dating Adrian Wolf? Were you with him last night? How long have you been seeing him?" Mira froze. Her mother appeared in the hallway behind her, confused and frightened. Mira raised an arm to shield her. "Please leave," she pleaded. "There is nothing going on." The reporters ignored her. The clip had reached national media during the early hours. Headlines read, "Billionaire seen seeking comfort from unknown woman in mystery. Waitress caught in emotional exchange with Adrian Wolf." The tavern owner called her an hour later, his voice panicked. "Mira, I am sorry, but you need to take time off. The media is everywhere. They are blocking customers. I cannot have this mess right now." Mira pressed a hand over her mouth. She had done nothing wrong. Yet her job was gone, her privacy gone, her safety threatened, all because she sat down for 5 minutes with a grieving man. She sank onto the couch, trembling, her mother hovering beside her with worried eyes. She whispered into the quiet apartment, "I only wanted to be kind." She never imagined kindness could take everything from her in a single night. Mira spent the entire morning fielding calls she never asked for. Some were reporters pretending to be customers. Some were strangers offering money if she would appear on a live stream. Some were insults from anonymous numbers accusing her of trying to trap a billionaire on Christmas Eve. She silenced her phone, but it continued vibrating every few minutes until she finally turned it off completely. Her mother sat on the sofa with a blanket around her thin shoulders, watching her with worry etched across her face. Mira tried to smile for her sake, but the corners of her mouth would not lift. By noon, the building superintendent knocked on their door to ask if she could use the back staircase because there were still cameras outside. Mira apologized, though none of it was her fault. She closed the door and leaned her forehead against it, wishing the world would give her one quiet hour to think. The thought she kept circling back to was the same whispered question from the night before. "Could you sit and talk with me just for 5 minutes?" She never expected that moment of compassion to explode into something this chaotic. Her mother shuffled closer. "Honey, maybe you should talk to someone important. Someone who understands this publicity stuff." Mira laughed without humor. "I do not know anyone important." Her mother gave her a look. "You might now." Mira shook her head firmly. "I am not calling him. He probably does not even remember my name." Even as she said it, her mind replayed the way Adrian had looked at her like she mattered. She dismissed the thought quickly. He was a billionaire who lived in a world padded with lawyers and publicists. She served drinks for a living. Their paths would never cross again, except they did. Around 1 in the afternoon, there was another knock at the door. Mira tensed, expecting reporters again. She prepared to tell them off, but when she pulled the door open, she froze. Standing in the hallway was Adrian Wolfe. Not in a tuxedo this time, not surrounded by cameras or security, not hidden behind the persona the world worshipped and feared. Just a man in a charcoal coat with snow in his dark hair holding a cup of hot coffee as if it were a peace offering. His expression held a mix of guilt and determination. Mira did not move. Neither did he. Then Adrian spoke first. "I am sorry." Mira swallowed hard. "You should not be here." His voice remained calm but sincere. "I saw the news when I woke up. I saw what they have done to you. You did nothing wrong, and yet you are paying the price for my vulnerability." Mira tightened her grip on the doorknob. "This is not your fault." Adrian shook his head. "It is. I should have known better. I should have known that being seen with me like that would attract attention. I should have protected you." She studied him. His exhaustion was still visible, but something else flickered beneath it. Resolve. He held out the coffee. "You looked cold last night. I thought you might need this." She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Her mother watched him with wide, curious eyes. Adrian offered a gentle nod as if entering someone's home were an honor he rarely received. Mira set the coffee on the small kitchen counter and crossed her arms. "You should not have come here. The press is already bad enough." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That is exactly why I came." Mira frowned. "And what exactly are you planning to fix?" Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. He set it on the table between them. It read only 2 letters. AWW. It was simple, yet unmistakably elegant. Mira blinked. "You gave me this last night. I did not think it meant anything. Means you can call me any time, for anything. But specifically for this. My team can take care of the media. We can issue statements. We can remove the pressure from your workplace. I can compensate your employer for the business he lost and get your job back." Mira immediately shook her head. "Absolutely not. I am not letting you buy your way out of this. I do not want your money." He held her gaze steadily. "I am not offering money. I am offering repair, because you were kind to me when I had nothing left to give." Mira looked away for a moment, breathing slowly as she tried to process everything. Her mother reached out and squeezed her arm. "Maybe you should hear him out, honey. He seems sincere." Mira exhaled. The truth was she had not slept since the footage went viral. Fear had clawed into her chest when she saw strangers swarming their hallway. She doubted Adrian could erase all of that, but the sunlight in his eyes when he looked at her held an honesty that was impossible to ignore. She sat at the table and Adrian quietly joined her. His hands rested flat on the surface as if showing he had nothing to hide. Mira cleared her throat. "My boss told me not to come in today. Reporters are blocking the door and customers are scared off." Adrian nodded. "I am working on that. But I want to hear what you want." She looked at him in disbelief. No one had ever asked her that. Not about anything meaningful. She took a deep breath. "I want my life back. I want to walk outside without someone pointing a camera at me. I want my mother to feel safe. I want to keep working because we need the money, and I want people to stop saying I am some gold digger trying to seduce you." Adrian's expression darkened with anger. "They will stop. I promise you that. I will make sure of it." Mira arched a brow softly. Big promises. Adrian met her gaze without wavering. "I do not make promises lightly." Mira studied him again. There was nothing romantic in this moment. Nothing charged. Just a billionaire sitting across from a waitress because he could not stand the thought of her suffering for something she did out of kindness. Mira leaned back slightly. "You really came all the way here to help me." He nodded once. Mira's mother watched them with a knowing look that Mira deliberately ignored. After a moment, Mira picked up the card again, running her fingers over the initials. "A-double," she whispered. "I nearly threw this away." Adrian allowed a faint, tired smile. "I am glad you did not." Her mother spoke up gently. "Sweetheart, call him. If you do not want help from him professionally, then at least let him explain things to the world. He looks like a man carrying more than he should." Mira sighed. She knew her mother was right. She also knew she could not face this alone. Finally, she turned to Adrian. "Fine, I will call. But not because you are rich, and not because you feel guilty. I will call because things are getting out of control, and I need the truth out there." Adrian nodded. "Whatever reason you choose is enough." At that moment, Mira's phone buzzed with a notification even though she thought she had turned it off. The headline flashed across the screen. "Anonymous source claims waitress involved with billionaire for months." Mira's breath stopped. Adrian's expression hardened. "Please," he said softly. "Let me help you." She closed her eyes for a long second, then whispered, "All right, you can fix this." Adrian stood. "Then I will." Mira looked up at him, unsure whether he was a storm or a shelter, but when she met his eyes, she saw something unexpected. Someone who needed her kindness as much as she now needed his help. And for the first time since the photo went viral, she felt a flicker of hope. Mira had agreed to let Adrian help her, yet when he stepped aside to make a discreet phone call in the hallway, she found herself pacing the kitchen, unsure if she had just made a decision that would anchor her life or blow it further off course. Her mother watched her with patient eyes, sensing Mira's inner conflict but saying nothing. A few minutes later, Adrian re-entered the apartment, slipping his phone into his coat pocket. His expression was calm, but edged with something sharper: determination. It was no longer the quiet, broken man from last night. This was the Adrian Wolf the world feared in business boardrooms, the man who had built a multi-billion-dollar company from nearly nothing. He met Mira's gaze with purposeful gentleness. "The statements will go out within the hour. They will identify the video as an invasion of privacy. They will clarify that nothing inappropriate happened. Your name will not be repeated by the press unless you decide otherwise." Mira folded her arms a little tighter. "So it will just vanish like that?" His jaw flexed. "It will not vanish entirely. Nothing ever does once it hits the internet. But I can remove most of the oxygen from the fire. I can take the attention off you." She nodded slowly, half relieved, half unsettled by how easily he could move mountains she had been crushed under for hours. She sat at the kitchen table because her legs felt suddenly weak. Adrian hesitated before joining her, as if unsure whether he still had the right to sit down across from her. Mira took a breath. "You said last night was hard for you, that you did not know what you were doing anymore." She looked at him steadily. "What did?" "Something happen." Adrian's gaze flickered toward her mother, who was busy in the living room straightening the blanket on the sofa. Mira lowered her voice. "You can tell me. If we are going to manage this mess together, I should know what I am stepping into." He exhaled, long and slow, a breath that carried months of unsaid truths. Then he nodded. "All right, let me show you something." He retrieved a tablet from his coat and tapped a folder that required fingerprint access. When the screen lit up, Mira saw a photograph that was both soft and heartbreaking. A woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile standing in a field of tall grass. "Lena," he said quietly, "my wife." "She was beautiful," Mira murmured. Adrian nodded with a distant ache. "She was a flight engineer, brilliant, irreplaceable. They had built Wolf Aerospace together, dreaming of advancing private space travel safely, and yet she had died in a facility meant to protect the brightest minds." Mira lowered her eyes respectfully. "I am so sorry," he continued. "The official report said mechanical failure, a faulty pressurization valve, a tragic mistake." He swallowed the words, turning heavy. But that was not the truth. Mira's attention sharpened. "What do you mean? Lena was the most cautious engineer I have ever known," he said. "She double-checked everything, triple-checked. She had concerns about a subcontractor who had recently won a bid to supply components for a shuttle model we were testing. She thought they were cutting corners. I asked if she wanted to file a report with the oversight board. She said she needed more evidence first." His voice wavered. "The explosion happened 3 days later." Mira felt a chill creep through her spine. "You think someone caused it?" He nodded slowly. "Or allowed it to happen through negligence and then covered the trail to protect themselves." Mira leaned closer. "Did you tell anyone?" Adrian shook his head. "My team insisted there was no foul play. They told me grief was clouding my judgment. Investors wanted silence for the sake of stability. And I—" He paused. "I could not think clearly enough to fight back." Mira studied him. "You think someone inside the industry hid the truth?" "Yes. And I suspect it is someone with enough power to make evidence disappear." Her heart sank. "Is that why you walked out of your gala last night?" He let out a weary exhale. "Last night would have been our anniversary. Lena always made me promise not to work on that day. So I showed up at the gala for appearances and left because I could not pretend anymore." The weight in his voice sent a ripple of empathy through her. She knew the kind of pain that hollowed out a person. She had lost her father to an accident when she was 17, leaving her and her mother struggling ever since. She knew how loss felt, like a language carved into your bones. Mira rested her elbows on the table. "You have carried all that alone for 2 years," he nodded. "Why not talk to someone? Anyone? Because every time I tried, I felt like I was betraying her memory." Saying the words out loud made everything too real. Mira let the silence breathe for a moment before speaking gently. "Carrying it alone does not keep her memory alive. It only keeps you drowning." Adrian stared at her, as if the truth of her words reverberated through him in a way he had never allowed before. By the time he found his voice again, it was quieter. "Do you ever talk about your father?" Mira blinked in surprise. "You read about me already?" She sounded sharper than she intended. His eyes softened. "Only enough to understand that losing him changed your world. I am not here to pry. I am here because if we are going to face the media, I need to make sure you are not blindsided by anything." Mira relaxed slightly. "My father died in a construction accident. Wrong place, wrong time. My mother and I never fully recovered from the medical bills. And now she is sick. Life does not wait for people to heal." Adrian lowered his gaze. "I wish it did." For a moment, they were two people sitting in the small kitchen sharing the kind of fragile honesty that only emerges when strangers become something more by accident. Adrian finally stood. "Come with me. There is somewhere I want to take you." Mira hesitated. "Why?" "If you are going to be dragged into my world even through no fault of your own, you deserve to see the full picture." She studied him. "What exactly is the full picture?" He looked at her with a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. "The truth, I have never told anyone." Mira debated for several breaths, then nodded. Her mother insisted she take a coat and whispered gently, "Maybe he needs a friend as much as you need help." Mira followed Adrian out of the apartment. Reporters were scattered outside the building but backed off when Adrian's security team discreetly appeared from a black SUV waiting at the curb. "I did not call the entire army," Adrian muttered. "Just enough to ensure your mother stays safe." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She climbed into the SUV beside him. The city blurred past as they drove north toward the Upper West Side. Eventually, they stopped outside a towering building made of glass and brushed steel. "The observatory," he said softly. "Come on." They took a private elevator up. The elevator doors opened into a vast room filled with telescopes, displays, and a ceiling dome that projected constellations across the walls. It was silent, except for the hum of machinery. Adrian led her toward the center of the room, where a holographic model of a shuttle rotated slowly. "This is where Lena and I spent most of our nights during the early years. She loved the stars. She believed they connected everything." He tapped the console and the lights dimmed. Small constellations flickered like fireflies on the walls. Mira felt the quiet reverence in the room and folded her arms gently. Adrian looked at her with eyes that held both longing and regret. "I come here when I cannot bear the silence at home. This is the only place where I still feel close to her." Mira stepped closer. "You do not have to be alone here." Something in him cracked. He took a quiet breath and said words that carried the weight of 2 years of silence. "I think someone murdered her dreams long before they killed her body, and I intend to find out who." Mira felt the truth settle around them like the night sky. She whispered, "Then you are not alone in this anymore." For the first time, Adrian believed it. Mira left the observatory that afternoon feeling strangely weightless, as if someone had opened a window inside her chest and let in air she did not know she had been starved of. The sky outside was streaked with pale winter light, the kind that made the city look softer than it really was. Adrian walked beside her with a quietness that felt different now. Not hollow, not numb, just present. For a man who had spent 2 years trapped inside grief and guilt, presence itself was a kind of miracle. They rode in the SUV back toward East Village, neither speaking for a long time. Mira traced her thumb along the hem of her sleeve, still processing everything he had shared. The truth of Lena's death, the cover-up, and the loneliness he carried like a second skin. She had expected tragedy. She had not expected conspiracy. Or the kind of pain that carved a man down to his foundations. Adrian seemed lost in thought, too, staring out the window as the city blurred past. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I did not plan to tell you any of that." Mira glanced at him. "Then why did you?" "Because you listened. Because you did not treat me like a headline. Because last night you looked at me like I was still a person." A small ache formed behind her ribs. She answered softly, "Everyone deserves to be treated like a person, even billionaires." He turned to her, something like gratitude flickering through his eyes. The SUV pulled up outside her apartment building. A few reporters lingered near the entrance but backed off when they saw Adrian's security detail step out. Mira felt uneasy as she stepped onto the sidewalk. "I hate that they are still here." "They will not be for long," Adrian assured. "My team is working on it." But she could feel something else in the air, a tension that had not been there hours earlier. 2 reporters were whispering urgently while staring at their phones. One lifted a camera and snapped a photo the moment she and Adrian passed. Mira quickened her pace, anxiety tight in her chest. Inside the lobby, her mother approached immediately. "Honey." Someone slid this under the door. Mira took the small envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper with printed words. "Stay away from him if you know what is good for you." Her stomach dropped. Her mother gasped. Mira's hands shook as she read it again. Adrian stepped beside her, the note reflected in his eyes. His expression hardened into something sharp and cold. "Who left this, I do not know. It was just on the floor." Adrian signaled to one of the security guards who took the note immediately. "Have this analyzed. Check for prints. Check for distribution. Check every camera near this building." Mira wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "You think this is because of last night?" Adrian spoke without hesitation. "No, this feels like something else." Mira frowned. "Something else?" Adrian inhaled deeply as if steadying himself. "Ethan Cole." Mira blinked. "The CEO, you think, is connected to Lena's death?" "Yes, he has been desperate to discredit me for months. If he sees you as connected to me, he may try to use you to get to me." Mira felt an icy rinse run through her veins. "Why me? Because you were seen with me in a moment of weakness. And because men like Ethan believe the easiest target is the one they think cannot fight back." Mira's pulse quickened. "So he sent me this threat?" "It is possible, and even if he did not, someone aligned with him might have." Mira sank into a chair. "This is insane. I am a waitress. I am no threat to anyone." Adrian crouched in front of her, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "You are a threat to him because you were kind to me, because you saw the truth of who I am, because people like Ethan fear losing control." Mira swallowed hard. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders, trembling. "I do not want you dragged into this," Mira whispered. "I never wanted any of this. And you should not have to face it alone," Adrian said. She stared at him. "What do we do now?" "We protect you. That is the first priority. Then we figure out why he is moving so fast." Adrian stood and motioned for the security guard. "Assign 2 people to stay near the building. Rotate every 6 hours. No one gets inside without approval." The guard nodded and stepped out. Mira looked shaken, but she forced herself upright. "I need to check on my mother." She moved toward the kitchen where her mother was trying to make tea despite trembling hands. Mira reached for the kettle. "Let me." Her mother whispered, "I do not like this. I do not like notes being slipped under the door. I know, Mom, but Adrian is helping." Her mother looked at her long and carefully. "Sometimes kindness pulls you into storms you never expected." Mira thought back to the bar, to the moment she chose to sit down for 5 minutes. 5 minutes that had rearranged her entire world. When she returned to the living room, Adrian stood near the window phone pressed to his ear. His voice was calm, but the tone was sharp with authority. The moment he hung up, he turned to Mira. "My team just confirmed something. Someone leaked a story to the press that you were trying to blackmail me." Mira recoiled. "What?" "That is absurd." "I know. Which is why this is coordinated. Someone wants to destroy your credibility." Mira paced in tight, anxious circles. People online believed anything if it was loud enough. She had read the comments accusing her of being manipulative, opportunistic, even predatory. She had not responded to any of it. She had no power to fight back. Adrian watched her closely. "Mira, look at me." She stopped pacing and met his eyes. "This is not your fault. This is someone using you to hurt me." Mira felt her throat tighten. "I did not ask for any of this. I know, which is why I am taking responsibility." Mira exhaled, trembling. "You said someone might try to hurt me, but this is not just media stuff. This is personal." Adrian nodded grimly. "It always becomes personal when it threatens someone's secrets." But he stopped suddenly as his phone buzzed loudly. He glanced at the screen. His jaw hardened. "It is Ethan." Mira's stomach lurched. "He wants to talk now." Adrian answered the call without hesitation, putting it on speaker. Ethan's voice filled the small apartment, silky and venomous. "I see you are having a very public holiday, Wolf." Adrian's voice dropped an octave, steel threading through it. "Stay away from her." Ethan chuckled. "You always were dramatic." "She is just another girl who sat at your table. Hardly worth my time. Mira bristled. I am right here. Ethan ignored her. If you continue digging into old reports, you will regret it. Adrian's eyes darkened. Threats do not work on me. They work on the people around you, though, Ethan said coolly. The call ended abruptly. Mira stood frozen. Adrian met her gaze. We need to move. Now. Mira frowned. Move where your apartment is not secure anymore. And if Ethan is escalating this quickly, I do not want you or your mother anywhere near the fallout. Mira felt a rush of panic. I cannot just leave. My mother cannot handle chaos. Adrian softened his voice. I am not taking you far. Just somewhere safe. Somewhere with controlled access. He paused. And I am not leaving you alone in this. Mira searched his face. There was no manipulation, no pity, only fierce protectiveness, the kind she had not felt since her father died. She nodded slowly. All right, but only until this settles. Adrian shook his head gently. This will not settle. Not until we uncover the truth. Mira inhaled sharply. Then what do we do? Adrian looked at her with quiet conviction. We face it together. Before she could respond, there was a crash outside the hallway. Loud. Sudden. Mira's mother gasped. Security shouted. Adrian moved instantly, placing himself between Mira and the door. She clutched her mother close, her heart pounding. Outside, voices rose in chaos, and Mira realized with cold clarity that the past Adrian had been running from had finally come for her, too. The crash outside the hallway echoed through the apartment like a warning shot sharp enough to freeze every muscle in Mira's body. Adrian moved so quickly she barely registered it, placing himself in front of her and her mother, while the security team shouted commands. A moment later, a guard's voice rang out. It is okay. It was just a reporter trying to force his way in. We have him restrained. But the damage had already been done. Mira stood trembling as adrenaline pulsed through her bloodstream, her mother clutching her tightly. Adrian's jaw was clenched so hard the tendons in his neck strained. This is escalating faster than I expected, he muttered. I am getting you two out of here now. Mira wanted to argue because leaving her home felt like losing one more piece of stability, but before she could speak, the security guard returned. Sir, the hallway is clear. We have 2 cars ready. Adrian looked at Mira. Pack a small bag. Essentials only. Mira nodded numbly and hurried to the bedroom. As she grabbed clothes for herself and her mother, her fingers brushed against the pocket of her work apron hanging on a hook. She paused. Something was inside. Something small and hard. Something she had forgotten about entirely. She slipped her hand into the pocket and pulled out a black USB drive. A faint chill crawled slowly up her spine as she stared at it. She remembered the moment now. A drunk man had been bothering her 2 nights ago, trying to hand her something while slurring about important proof. Mira had taken it from him only to remove him from the bar before he caused more trouble. She never looked at what he gave her, never had the time. From the hallway, Adrian called Mira. Are you ready? She stared at the USB, an inexplicable heaviness settling in her chest. Not yet. Can you give me a minute? She tucked the USB into her bag and returned to the living room. A few minutes later, the SUV pulled away from the curb with Mira and her mother inside, while another car followed to ensure no one tailed them. The city stretched out in cold gray hues as they drove toward a safer location. Adrian sat across from Mira, his expression unreadable. He checked on her mother gently, offering her water and assuring her everything would be all right. Mira watched him silently. Despite the chaos, his presence felt grounding, strong, and unexpectedly familiar. When they reached a discreetly guarded residential building in Midtown, the security team ushered them inside. The lobby was quiet marble floors, thick carpeting. Warm lighting meant to keep voices from echoing. Adrian led them to an apartment reserved for emergencies, a place he had never shown anyone. Mira helped her mother settle onto the sofa, then slipped into the small adjoining bedroom. Her heart raced as she closed the door and pulled out the USB again. She did not know why, but she felt compelled to see what was on it. Compelled in the same way someone feels when they stand on the edge of a truth they are not ready for but can no longer avoid. She plugged it into the laptop on the nightstand and waited. A single folder appeared untitled. Inside was only one file. A video. Mira swallowed and clicked. The footage opened in a dimly lit testing chamber. Technicians whispered hurriedly. The timestamp showed it was the night of the explosion. The night Lena died. Mira leaned closer, heart pounding. A woman's voice filled the room. Calm, precise, urgent. Lena Wolf. She was filming herself on a handheld camera, her face illuminated by the cool blue glow of the control room. "If Adrian ever sees this," she said quietly, "I want him to know I tried. I really tried." Mira covered her mouth with a shaking hand. Lena continued, "They are switching out the pressure regulators. The ones approved for this model are being replaced with cheaper versions from an unauthorized subcontractor. I confronted Ethan about it. He dismissed me, said I was overreacting. But if I am right, this could cause catastrophic failure." She inhaled sharply. "I do not know who else to trust. The Oversight Board will not investigate without proof, and Ethan is pushing for tomorrow's test anyway. If you found this, that means something went wrong. I am sorry." Mira blinked back tears as Lena's voice softened. "Adrian, I love you. Please do not blame yourself. It is not your fault." The video cut off abruptly. Mira felt the air leave her lungs. She replayed it again just to make sure she was not imagining what she had just heard. It was undeniably real, undeniably damning, undeniably dangerous. A knock sounded at the door. Mira startled, shutting the laptop. Mira. Adrian's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" She took a deep breath and opened the door. He looked instantly concerned when he saw her shaken expression. "What happened?" She hesitated, then lifted the laptop slightly. "I found something in my apron. I did not know it was there." His brow furrowed. "What is it?" Mira walked to the table and opened the laptop, again pressing play. Adrian leaned over her shoulder. As Lena's face filled the screen, everything inside him stilled. His breath caught, his hands trembled. He lowered himself slowly into the nearest chair as if gravity had doubled. Mira watched him, her own heart breaking at the way his grief resurfaced raw and trembling. He whispered her name, barely audible, Lena. Seeing her alive on the screen, hearing her voice confessing the very truth he had suspected for 2 years, broke him open. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Mira rested a gentle hand on the edge of the table, giving him space, but not leaving him alone. When the video ended, Adrian pressed his palm over his eyes. His voice cracked. She knew. She knew they were lying. Mira nodded softly. "And she tried to warn you?" Adrian shook his head in disbelief. "Where did you get this?" Mira explained the moment in the bar with the drunk man how she had taken the USB from him without thinking. Adrian's mind moved quickly. He was trying to give it to you. He must have known what he had. Some subcontractor or technician Lena had confided in. Mira felt the gravity of it all settle in her bones. "This proves everything you suspected. It proves more than that," Adrian whispered, his voice hollow. "It proves Ethan was involved." He stood abruptly, pacing the room, his hands fisted, his jaw clenched. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of a truth he had chased for years but feared to find. Mira remained calm, her voice steady. "Adrian, we have to be careful with this. This is not just a file. This is evidence." He turned to her with eyes haunted. "This is the reason she is dead." Mira felt her stomach twist. "You think he silenced her?" Adrian's voice was broken, but certain. She confronted Ethan. She documented proof. The explosion happened 3 days later. None of that is coincidence. Mira steadied herself. "The video also puts a target on us." Adrian nodded. "Which is why we cannot let this leave our sight." He took a breath, then reached for his phone. "I am sending this to a secure server. We need backups. Multiple." He paused. "And I need you to stay close." Mira met his gaze. There was fear in her chest, but there was also a fierce resolve forming inside her. "I am not going anywhere. Not when someone tried so hard to keep this buried." Adrian watched her with something unreadable in his eyes. Gratitude. Respect. Something deeper he was not ready to name. Before he could speak, one of the security guards knocked urgently. "Sir, we have a problem." Adrian's expression sharpened at once. "What is it?" The guard hesitated. "Someone tried to access the building's back entrance. We stopped them, but they knew your name. And hers." Mira's breath hitched. Adrian's voice darkened. "They are coming for the file." Mira clutched the laptop to her chest. "Then we protect it." Adrian stepped closer, standing beside her like a barrier against the world. "No. We protect you." Mira felt the truth settle heavily. The file belonged to a woman who died too soon. Now it might save the one who found it. The apartment felt smaller after the guard's warning, as though the walls themselves had begun to bend inward, pressed by secrets that had finally woken from 2 years of silence. Mira held the laptop tight against her chest, her pulse drumming in her ears. Adrian moved with a sharp, focused urgency she had never seen before, though underneath it she sensed something more fragile. He was terrified of losing the last piece of Lena he had left. He was terrified of losing the truth, and just beneath that barely hidden was something else entirely. He was terrified of losing Mira, too. Adrian turned to the guard. "Strengthen the perimeter. No one enters or leaves without my approval." The guard nodded and left quickly. Mira exhaled shakily. "Adrian, we need to think carefully. If they try to get in once, they will try again. They want the file, and they know I have it." Adrian paced the room like a man trying to outrun ghosts. "They cannot get it. They cannot know what is on it. If Ethan even suspects we have Lena's recording, he will burn the city to keep it hidden." Mira stepped forward. "Then we go somewhere safer, somewhere they cannot reach us." Adrian paused. "There is only one place like that, and it is not here." He glanced toward her mother, who was sitting quietly on the sofa, knitting nervously, though her trembling hands made it difficult. She looked up at both of them with frightened eyes. "Mira, your mother should stay here," he said gently. "It is secure enough for now. But you and I need distance and privacy to watch the video again to understand every detail of it, to know exactly what Lena discovered." Mira hesitated. "I do not want to leave her. I will assign 2 guards to stay inside this apartment at all times, and I will check on her personally before we leave," he promised. He turned to Mira's mother with a solemn sincerity few people ever saw from him. "I will not let anything happen to either of you." Her mother nodded slowly, visibly calming under his steady tone. Mira swallowed her fear and nodded. "Fine, but only if we are not gone long." Adrian looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart tighten. "We will be gone only as long as necessary to understand the truth." He guided her toward the door. The guards escorted them down the hall and into the private elevator. When the doors closed, Mira finally allowed herself to breathe. The city lights blinked below as the elevator descended. She clutched the laptop closer. Adrian noticed. He reached out gently, covering her hands with his. "I will protect you, no matter what happens." She looked up at him, the soft glow of the elevator lights sharpening the exhaustion on his face. "Do not make promises you cannot keep." His voice lowered. "I have never made a promise I did not intend to keep." When they stepped out onto the street, another SUV waited. They climbed inside, and the vehicle pulled into the night, weaving through Midtown before heading north. The city transformed as they drove. Traffic thinned. Buildings grew shorter. Snow thickened along the sidewalks. Eventually, the SUV turned down a quiet road lined with townhouses before stopping in front of a brick building with a nondescript door. Mira frowned. "Where are we?" Adrian opened the door with a key. "A safe house. Private. Secure. Only I and 2 people I trust know it exists." He helped her inside. The interior was simple but warm. Wooden floors, a fireplace, a long table, 2 couches. It felt more like a retreat than a hiding place. Mira set the laptop on the table while Adrian lit the fireplace. The flames cast a soft, flickering light across the room. Mira sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of the day settle over her like a heavy blanket. Adrian sat across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. When he finally spoke, His voice was quieter than before. "Show me the video again." Mira opened the laptop and pressed play. Lena's voice filled the room. Calm, controlled, brilliant, afraid. Mira did not look at the screen this time. She watched Adrian. Watched the way his chest tightened when Lena said, "If you found this, that means something went wrong." Watched the way his eyes softened when Lena whispered, "Adrian, I love you." Watched the way he endured the pain like someone who had endured so much of it he no longer knew where the edges of it were. When the video ended, he did not move for a long time. Finally, he whispered, she knew she was in danger. She knew. Mira nodded. And she trusted someone enough to give them this, someone who must have tried to protect her. Adrian shook his head slowly. And now they are dead or terrified. Because this file... He looked at Mira, pain and determination warring behind his eyes. "This file changes everything." Mira leaned forward. "Then we need to know every detail in it, everything she was trying to expose." Adrian nodded. "We will go through it frame by frame." He handed her a second laptop from a storage drawer. They began transferring the video to a secure encrypted server. While it loaded, Mira asked softly, "Do you think Lena expected you to find this?" Adrian exhaled. She always said the truth finds its way to light, sometimes even through the wrong hands. Mira looked down at her lap. "I never met your wife, but she seemed strong, smart, braver than she realized." Adrian's voice cracked slightly. She was all of those things. Mira hesitated, then admitted, "I am sorry you have to watch this." He looked at her. "I am not sorry you are here." She glanced away quickly, her heart skipping once. She needed space to think, to breathe. But the moment was interrupted by the file finally finishing its backup. Mira reopened the video and paused at specific frames. "Here," she said, pointing at the screen. "Look at the timestamp on the equipment logs." Adrian leaned closer. "This was not the model approved for the test. It is a downgraded version." Mira nodded. "And look at the initials on the authorization line. E.C. Adrian's breath hitched. Ethan Cole. She authorized nothing. He forged this. Mira felt fear twist in her stomach. If this gets out, everything he built collapses. He will do anything to stop that. Adrian closed the laptop gently. "That is why we must act before he does." The fire crackled softly as they sat in silence. Mira stared at the flames, but her thoughts raced. Suddenly, she became aware of how close they were, sitting their knees almost touching. Adrian watched her quietly. "You are shaking. I am not used to being dragged into corporate wars," she said with a nervous laugh. "I am a waitress trying to pay medical bills." Adrian's eyes softened. "You are more than that." Mira swallowed. "And you are more broken than you let people see." He exhaled the sound almost a confession. "I do not know how to be anything else." Mira shifted closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do not have to carry all of this alone anymore." Something in Adrian loosened at her words. He leaned back slightly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Mira hesitated, then placed her hand gently over his. He did not pull away. Instead, he closed his fingers around hers with a soft trembling he could not hide. For the first time since the night began, the fear inside her eased. They sat like that for a long moment, and a silence not of dread but of shared understanding. When Mira finally spoke again, her voice was calm. "We should rest. Tomorrow we decide what to do next." Adrian nodded, though he did not let go of her hand immediately. Finally, he rose and stepped toward the window, scanning the street below. "Just stay where I can see you," he said softly. Mira felt warmth rise in her cheeks. "All right." She lay on the couch, pulling a blanket over herself. Adrian took the chair across from her, refusing to sleep until he was certain she was safe. The fire dimmed. The city outside hummed in muted tones. And as the long night stretched on, filled with danger and truth and fragile trust, Mira let her eyes close, finally feeling something she had not felt in days. Safe. Mira woke to the soft glow of morning filtering through the curtains, her body wrapped in warmth but her mind snapping instantly back into alertness. For a brief second, she forgot where she was expecting to hear her mother in the next room, or the usual hum of the old radiator in their apartment. But instead, she heard nothing except the faint crackle of the dying fire and the quiet, steady rhythm of someone breathing nearby. Adrian sat in the armchair exactly where he had been the night before. His posture rigid, his eyes half-lidded with exhaustion, yet still awake. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. Mira pushed herself upright. "You stayed awake all night," he nodded, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Could not risk anything happening while you slept." Mira studied him, the shadows under his eyes, the tension carved deep into his shoulders. "You need rest. You cannot protect me if you collapse." Adrian managed a faint, tired smile. "I have been collapsing for 2 years and still upright." Mira did not smile back. Her chest tightened, seeing the toll this was taking on him, but before she could say more, his phone buzzed sharply on the table. He snatched it up. "Wolf?" he answered. His expression immediately shifted to something sharper. "What did you find?" He listened in silence, his jaw tightening with every word. When the call ended, he lowered the phone slowly. Mira stepped closer. "What happened?" "The man who gave you the USB." Adrian said quietly. "The drunk one from the bar." Mira felt her breath hitch. "What about him?" "He is missing." The words settled between them like ice. Missing, as in, gone from his apartment since yesterday. His roommates thought he left early for work, but never returned. Mira swallowed fear like a cold ripple through her. "You think Ethan took him?" Adrian's voice was firm. "I think Ethan has people who make problems disappear." Mira wrapped her arms around herself. "Why would he give the USB to me? Why not to you, or someone on your team?" Adrian exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Because anyone connected to me would be watched. You were the only one who treated him with kindness. He probably trusted you more than someone with power." Mira's stomach twisted. She remembered the man's desperate eyes, the urgency in his voice before she pushed him out of the tavern. She whispered, "I did not know he had something like that. I did not know he was scared." Adrian stepped closer, his voice steady. "Mira, none of this is your fault." He pressed a hand over hers, grounding her. "He was brave enough to get the file out. You kept it safe. Because of you, we have the truth now." She nodded weakly, but the guilt lingered like smoke. Before either of them could speak again, there was a loud knock on the front door. Mira jerked back. Adrian raised a hand, warning her to stay behind him. The guard outside called through the door. "Sir, you need to see this." Adrian opened the door just enough to speak with the guard. Mira could only hear fragments. "Found near back entrance, knew her name, searching for a woman." Mira's pulse spiked. Adrian returned to her immediately. "We need to leave. Now." She stared. "Leave where to somewhere they cannot predict. Somewhere outside the city." He grabbed his coat and handed Mira hers. She hesitated. "My mother." Drian nodded. "2 guards are watching her right now. They will not let anyone near her. I will check on her myself as soon as you are safe." Safe. The word felt heavy. Unsafe was the only thing she had felt for the past 24 hours. But she trusted him more than she trusted the city. They moved quickly, slipping out a side door guarded by 2 security officers. A second SUV waited. Snow fell harder now, thick flakes swirling like a veil. The car pulled into traffic heading north out of Manhattan. Mira watched the skyline shrink through the window, her hand still clutching the laptop. Adrian never took his eyes off the road ahead, even though he was not the one driving. Finally, she whispered, "Where are we going?" "A place no one knows except me. A cabin in the Hudson Valley. It is secluded. Impossible to approach without being seen." Mira's breath fogged the cold glass. "Ethan will not stop, will he?" Adrian's jaw tensed. "Not until he is certain the evidence is gone." Mira felt fear coil in her chest again. "And if he cannot find us, he will make noise, enough to flush us out." Mira closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. After nearly 2 hours of driving, the SUV exited onto a quiet road lined with leafless trees, their branches curled against the winter sky. The vehicle climbed a winding hill until a cabin appeared at the top, small, rustic, and surrounded by forest. They stepped out into the freezing air. The place looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos swallowing their lives. Adrian unlocked the door, and Mira stepped inside. Warm wooden walls, a stone fireplace, plaid blankets. It was humble, but comforting. Adrian lit the fireplace while Mira set the laptop on a sturdy wooden table. The flames soon filled the room with soft orange light. Mira sat on the couch, pulling her knees up. "Do you think he will find us here?" Adrian sat beside her, studying the fire. "Not easily, but he is desperate now. Desperation makes men reckless." Mira stared at the flames. "I am scared." Adrian turned his head. "So am I." She looked at him, startled. He pointed to the laptop. "That file is the closest thing I have to hearing Lena tell the truth with her own voice. It is the last piece of her I will ever find." He swallowed hard. "If Ethan takes it, I lose her again." Something inside Mira softened painfully. She reached out without thinking and rested her hand over his. His fingers tightened around hers immediately, as if anchoring himself. Then he exhaled slowly and released her hand gently. "We should go through the video again," he said quietly, frame by frame. They opened the laptop and played the video repeatedly, pausing, zooming, listening. At one point, Mira pointed to a blurry figure in the background. "Who is that?" Adrian leaned in. "That is the same technician who filed an anonymous complaint 3 weeks before the accident, the one who went missing." Mira felt her breath catch. "Drian, this is bigger than negligence." He nodded grimly. "Ethan has a web of people covering tracks." Mira rubbed her forehead. "If he is willing to threaten me, imagine what he did to the people who worked under him." Adrian's voice darkened. "I intend to find out." They continued analyzing until the sun had dipped fully behind the trees. The cabin grew darker except for the firelight. Mira stood to pour water into 2 mugs. As she moved near the window, she froze. A figure stood at the edge of the tree line, motionless, watching. Mira inhaled sharply. Adrian. He was on his feet instantly. What Mira pointed, outside, in the trees. Adrian crossed the room and stood behind her. His voice dropped. "Move back. Do not stand in front of the window." She obeyed instantly. He pulled the curtain closed, then signaled to the guard outside. Within seconds, the security detail came inside, scanning the perimeter. One guard returned quickly. "No one is there now, sir. Tracks in the snow." Someone was watching. Mira's heart raced. Adrian turned to her. "We are out of time." Mira gripped the laptop protectively. "Then we leave." "No," Adrian said firmly. "We end this." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. It contained only 3 words. "Give it back." Mira stared at the screen, her pulse pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. Adrian took the phone from her hands. His expression was razor sharp. "He is close. Too close." Mira's voice shook. "What do we do now?" Adrian looked at her with fierce determination. "We stop running. We go to the one place Ethan cannot silence us. We're the boardroom. The place where he holds power. The place where we will take it from him." Mira felt fear coil inside her, but she nodded. If this was the only way to protect the truth, she would not run either. Adrian stepped closer. "Mira, listen to me. You are not facing this because of me. You are facing it with me. There is a difference." She held his gaze steady. "Then, let us finish what she started." He closed his eyes briefly as though the words struck him in the deepest part of himself. Then he whispered, "Lena would have trusted you, and so do I." Outside, the forest moved with the wind. Inside the cabin, 2 people braced for the storm that was about to break over them both. The fire crackled softly as Mira stood near the window, her pulse still racing from the shadow she had seen outside. The image lingered in her mind, a silent threat hovering between the trees, reminding her that danger was not a distant echo anymore. It was here. Close? Watching. Adrian paced near the fireplace, running a hand along his jaw, the tension in his posture unmistakable. He looked like a man carrying two battles at once, the one against Ethan Cole, and the one inside himself. Mira closed the curtains and wrapped her arms around her torso. For the first time since all this began, fear pressed against her ribs in a way she could not swallow down. Adrian noticed immediately and stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You do not have to be afraid." Mira gave him a tired, almost incredulous look. "You keep saying that, but someone was actually out there. And now we are going straight into the storm." He paused, his breath unsteady for a moment. "I know. I wish I could promise nothing will happen to you." She interrupted softly. "You cannot promise that." Adrian hesitated. "No, I cannot. But I can promise I will not let you face any of this alone." Mira exhaled and moved toward the fireplace, letting the heat warm her hands. She watched the flames rise and fall in quiet waves, almost hypnotic. It reminded her vaguely of the emotional rhythm she had felt since meeting him. Fear, calm, fear again, truth, connection, something like hope, something that did not make sense. The laptop rested on the table behind them. The truth, Lena left. The reason, everything had shattered. Mira turned toward Adrian slowly. "When did you know it was not an accident?" He closed his eyes for a second. "The moment they told me she died." The words came out strained. Lena did not make careless mistakes. She never once failed a safety test. When the facility claimed it was a mechanical malfunction, something inside me knew they were lying. But grief does strange things. It makes you doubt your instincts. Mira sat down on the couch, pulling her knees up slightly. What would she say now if she saw all this happening? Adrian's voice softened painfully. She would say, "I am being reckless, that I should think logically, that I should not drag anyone down with me." Mira tilted her head. "And what do you think?" Adrian met her gaze. "I think you saved me before you even knew what you were doing." Mira's breath caught. She did not know how to respond to that. She had never saved anyone before. She barely saved herself most days. But something in his voice broke open a quiet ache inside her. Something she had buried under endless shifts and overdue bills. She whispered, "I did not mean to get involved in any of this." Adrian's voice softened even more. "I know, and yet you stayed." Mira swallowed, looking down at her hands. "I stayed because someone had to see your pain. Because someone had to listen when you asked for those 5 minutes." Adrian stepped closer, resting his hand gently on the back of the couch. His voice dropped. "Those 5 minutes changed everything." Her heart thudded once heavy and confusing. She looked away quickly. "Do not say things like that. Not now. Not when everything is so unstable." Adrian lowered himself onto the couch, leaving a thoughtful space between them. "You think I am saying it lightly? I think you are saying it out of fear, or loneliness, or grief." She looked at him directly. "And none of that is fair to either of us." Adrian pressed his palms together, staring into the fire as though trying to find clarity in the flames. "Mira, you are right. My life has been full of noise for so long. Last night was the first time someone actually saw me. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me." Mira hesitated. "And what exactly are you trying to say?" He turned to face her fully now, scars in his expression visible only when he let down every wall he had. "I am saying that I want to protect you. Not because I owe you, not because you were kind, but because I cannot stand the thought of anything happening to you." Mira froze. The room felt suddenly smaller, the fire warmer, the air thicker. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Adrian, what you are feeling is not simple. You are grieving. You are chasing answers. And I happen to be the person who found the one piece of truth you have been searching for." His voice remained steady. "And you think that is why I care?" Mira looked away. "I think people in pain sometimes reach for whatever feels safe." He inhaled sharply. "You think I am using you as a shield?" Mira said nothing. The silence answered for her. Adrian stood pacing again. His fists curled, then relaxed as he tried to find words that did not exist. Finally, he stopped in front of her. "You are not a shield. You are the first person who made me feel something other than emptiness." Mira's eyes lifted slowly. She shook her head. "Do not say that. Not until this is over. Not until you can tell what is grief and what is real." He lowered himself back beside her, closer now, but still careful. "You are right," he admitted, "and I will not push you into anything. I know the difference between gratitude and something deeper. I will wait until I know the truth of my own heart." Mira felt a tremor of relief mixing with something warm and dangerous. She whispered, "Thank you." The fire flickered, drawing soft golden lines across their faces. Adrian leaned back, calmer now. "We should go through the video one more time," he said. Mira nodded. Logic felt safer than emotion. She opened the laptop. They spent hours analyzing every frame again. Every timestamp, every background movement. Adrian noticed something he had missed before. Pause that frame. Mira froze the video. "What is it? Look at the console behind her." Mira leaned in. "There is a screen flashing a warning, but there is no audio." Adrian nodded. Someone muted the microphone manually, and only someone with high-level clearance could do that. Mira felt her stomach knot. Did Ethan have clearance? He had everything he needed to override internal controls. He could have allowed the test to proceed even after warnings. Mira exhaled slowly. "So, this is not just negligence. It is orchestration." Adrian closed the laptop. "We need to take this to the board. Today." Mira shook her head. "We cannot walk in unprepared. He will twist things. He will blame you. He will say the file is fake." Adrian nodded. "Which is why we need witnesses. And evidence. And someone willing to testify." Mira frowned. "Who would do that? Everyone else who knew something has disappeared." Adrian stepped closer to her, speaking softly. "Not everyone." Mira froze. "You do not mean me." "I do." Mira's heart slammed into her ribs. "Adrian," she whispered, "I cannot go against a man like Ethan. I am nobody." Adrian's voice dropped to something fierce. "You are not nobody. You are the only person he cannot silence." She looked at him, fear and disbelief colliding in her chest. "I am a waitress. He will tear me apart." Adrian gently took her hands. "You faced him without knowing it. You stood in front of a storm you could not even name. And you are still here." She swallowed hard. "I am scared. I know," he said, "and so am I. But fear does not mean we stop. Fear means we are close to the truth." Mira looked down at their hands, his fingers warm and strong around hers. She whispered, "What if he comes after us again?" Adrian met her gaze. "Then we face him. Together." The word "together" settled between them like a vow. Mira exhaled shakily. "Okay, I will testify." Adrian looked at her with something raw and grateful in his eyes. "You just changed everything." The fireplace crackled softly as Mira leaned back into the couch, trembling but resolved. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen trees, but inside the cabin, truth had finally found a place to breathe. For the first time, Mia felt not just fear, but purpose. And Adrian felt not just grief, but direction. Tomorrow, they would walk into the boardroom. Tomorrow, they would confront Ethan. Tomorrow, the storm would break. But tonight, in the cabin where truths finally unfolded, they made a quiet, unspoken promise. They would not run. They would not hide. They would not break. Not anymore. Morning arrived, not with sunlight, but with a heavy grayness that settled over the Hudson Valley like a warning. Mira stood by the window of the cabin, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she had barely touched. Her stomach churned, every breath shallow. Adrian moved around the room, quietly gathering documents, encrypted drives, and a printed transcript of Lena's video. He had not slept either. But unlike the exhausted, broken man she met that first night, this version of Adrian radiated purpose. A cold, focused determination that belonged to someone who had finally seen the truth clearly enough to stop running from it. When he approached Mira, his expression softened. "You do not have to do this if you are not ready." She looked up at him, fear flickering in her eyes. I am not ready. I am terrified, but I am still going. He nodded. Then, so am I. They left the cabin just after sunrise, escorted by 2 cars of security. The roads were slick with frost, the trees bowing under the weight of snow. Mira held the laptop on her lap the entire drive, clutching it like a lifeline. Adrian's presence beside her steadied her more than she expected. He did not touch her, yet the quiet strength in his posture and his voice when he answered calls from his legal team in every decision he made. It anchored her. When the SUV crossed back into Manhattan, her breath shook at the sight of the towering skyline. The city had swallowed her whole in less than 2 days. Now she was walking straight into its fire. Wolf Aerospace headquarters rose like a monument of glass and steel, its lobby filled with security employees and the usual cold elegance associated with billion-dollar companies. But today was different. Something tense hummed through the air. Whispers, eyes darting toward them. Headlines had already spread rumors of a scandal involving Ethan and corporate sabotage. The board had demanded an emergency meeting. Adrian led Mira to the private elevator. He glanced at her once. Last chance to run. Mira shook her head, though her voice trembled. I am here. The elevator climbed every floor indicator ding, tightening the knot inside her chest. When the doors opened to the executive level, a dozen voices erupted at once as board members and attorneys surrounded them. Adrian Wolf. Where have you been? What is this nonsense in the press? Ethan says you are making outrageous accusations. And who is she? The barrage of questions nearly knocked the breath out of Mira. Adrian raised a hand, voice steady. Everyone in the conference room. Now. They obeyed, because despite rumors, despite Ethan's influence, Adrian Wolf was still the founder, the visionary, the name on the building. And today he looked like a man ready to reclaim every inch of that authority. They entered the boardroom, a long polished table, panoramic views of Manhattan leather chairs arranged in perfect precision. And at the far end, seated calmly as if he owned the entire city, was Ethan Cole. He smiled when he saw Mira, the kind of smile that pretends to be polite but hides something sharp. Miss Thompson, he drawled, I did not expect to see you here. Mira's blood ran cold. Adrian stepped in front of her, blocking Ethan's view. Sit down, Ethan. The meeting is starting. Ethan smirked. By all means, let the circus begin. The board members settled uneasily. Lawyers opened briefcases. Adrian took his place at the head of the table but did not sit. He looked at each board member in turn. 2 years ago, my wife died in an explosion at our testing facility. We were told it was a malfunction, human error, mechanical failure, a tragic accident. He paused, his voice tightening. That was a lie. Ethan leaned back casually. Careful, Wolf. Making accusations without proof can damage reputations, yours included. Adrian ignored him. Yesterday, I obtained evidence that the accident was the direct result of unauthorized component substitutions approved by someone within this company. Someone who forged documentation. Someone who silenced engineers who raised concerns. Gasps broke across the table. Ethan's smirk faltered slightly. Adrian continued. That evidence came from Lena herself. Mira stepped forward, then plugging the laptop into the conference screen. Her knees nearly buckled, but she stayed steady. Adrian looked at her with a flicker of reassurance. Mira pressed play. Lena appeared. The room fell silent. Completely silent. Lena's voice filled the boardroom. Calm. Clear. Devastating. She detailed the unauthorized substitutions, her confrontation with Ethan, her fear that the upcoming test would end in disaster. When the video ended, the board sat in stunned paralysis. Ethan's face had gone pale, but his voice emerged sharp. This is fabricated. Edited. Conveniently discovered by some waitress. Mira's heart hammered, but she spoke before she could lose her courage. I found it in the pocket of a man who tried to warn your company. A man who has disappeared since yesterday. Her voice shook, but the truth steadied it. He tried to give it to me because he had no one else to trust. Ethan scoffed. She is delusional. She is your mistress wolf, nothing more, the board murmured. Mira felt heat rise in her face, but before she could react, Adrian slammed a hand onto the table. Do not speak about her again. His voice thundered through the room. She is the only person who has shown courage in this entire mess. Ethan pointed at the screen. This video is fake. Anyone can doctor footage? Adrian gestured to the general counsel. We verified the metadata. Time-stamped. Original encoding. Unaltered. A lawyer confirmed quietly. It matches internal facility records. Ethan's voice rose louder, losing its calm. You are letting a grieving woman's paranoia destroy this company. Adrian's voice sharpened into steel. She was not paranoid. She was murdered by your negligence. Ethan shot to his feet. You cannot prove anything. Adrian locked eyes with him. I can prove enough. He nodded to Mira. Bring up the authorization logs. Mira's hands trembled as she navigated the files. The screen displayed the forged initials. E.C. A board member gasped. Ethan lunged forward. Those could be anyone's. But his voice broke. His confidence began to crack. Adrian leaned in slightly, his voice deadly calm. You muted the microphone in the control room that night? Only someone with your clearance could do that. Ethan faltered. That is not true. Adrian's voice became low and lethal. You silenced her. Not physically, but by forcing her to run tests she knew were unsafe. You killed her by ignoring every warning she gave you. Ethan slammed a hand onto the table. I did what I had to do to keep this company profitable. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then Adrian spoke quietly. There it is. The truth. The board erupted. Lawyers stood. Some shouted for security, others yelled for an immediate investigation. Ethan backed away, his face contorting with rage and panic. This is a setup. You are all fools. He turned sharply toward the door, but the door opened before he reached it. 2 FBI agents stepped inside holding badges. Ethan Cole. We need you to come with us. Ethan's voice broke into a snarl. You cannot do this. This is illegal. This is a misunderstanding. The agents moved forward. Ethan fought their grip, screaming curses, threatening lawsuits, calling everyone incompetent. But none of it stopped the cuffs from clicking around his wrists. As they dragged him from the room, he turned one last time, his voice trembling with pure hatred directed at Mira. This is your fault. Mira stiffened, fear slicing through her. But Adrian stepped in front of her, blocking Ethan completely. No, he said quietly, it is yours. The doors closed behind Ethan's struggling form. The room fell still. Adrian reached out and gently touched Mira's arm, grounding her. It is over. But even as he said it, he knew the storm had not fully passed. Not yet. Still, the boardroom confrontation had ended with truth on the table and the man who tried to silence them in handcuffs. And standing beside Mira, Adrian felt something he had not felt in 2 years. Justice. The hours after Ethan's arrest unfolded in a blur that felt both unreal and inevitable. Mira found herself sitting in a private lounge adjacent to the boardroom, her hands still trembling from the confrontation, but her mind strangely clear. Outside the glass walls, the entire building buzzed with frantic movement. Employees whispered in hallways, legal teams printed stacks of documents, reporters flooded the street below like a rising tide. The truth was finally breaking through the walls Ethan had built over 2 years, and the sound of it cracking felt like distant thunder rolling through Manhattan. Adrian paced the room, speaking quietly with the general counsel and the head of communications. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the weight of everything he had just exposed. When he finally hung up the phone, he turned to Mira. They want me downstairs in 20 minutes, he said. The press is already gathering. Mira's stomach tightened. Are you ready? Adrian exhaled a slow, unsteady breath. I have not been ready for anything since the day Lena died, but today I am not running. Mira nodded, though her chest tightened with nerves. Reporters would tear him apart. They would drag her into it too, but the truth demanded to be seen. Adrian touched the back of a chair, grounding himself. Mira, you do not have to stand beside me downstairs. You have already done more than enough. Mira straightened. "I am not hiding now. You told me we face this together. I meant it." His eyes softened, but he did not argue. In the elevator descent, sunlight spilled in from the side window, turning the dust in the air into tiny, glowing particles. It looked almost peaceful despite the chaos waiting below. When the doors opened, the lobby was a storm of microphones, bright camera lights, and a wall of reporters pressing against the barricades. Security officers held them back as voices rose in a frantic wave. Adrian Wolfe. "Is it true? Ethan Cole sabotaged the facility. Did you cover this up? Is the waitress your new girlfriend? Did she manipulate you? Did you retaliate against your own company?" People shouted over one another, the flashes blinking like lightning. Adrian stepped forward. Mira slightly behind him, but close enough that he could sense her presence. He lifted a hand. The lobby fell into relative silence as every camera locked on him. For 2 years, he began, "I believed my wife died because of a malfunction during a scheduled test. I believed what I was told, and I believed the people in charge acted with integrity." His voice did not waver. "I was wrong." Reporters leaned forward, hungry. Yesterday, evidence surfaced revealing the test had been forced through despite critical safety warnings. Documentation was falsified. Engineers were silenced, and decisions were made that put profit above human life. He paused the room, holding its breath. Those decisions led to the death of Lena Wolfe. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, reporters scribbling furiously. Adrian continued, "There will be a full federal investigation. Our board has unanimously voted to cooperate. Wolfe Aerospace will open all records to the authorities. Today marks the beginning of transparency not just for this company but for every family who has suffered because of corporate negligence." His gaze steadied. "And that begins with accountability." He stepped aside, slightly revealing Mira. Mira Thompson helped bring this evidence forward at great personal risk. She is not an employee of this company. She is not tied to any agenda. She is simply someone who refused to look away from the truth. Cameras swung toward her, instantly blinding her with flashes. Mira's breath caught, but she stayed still. A reporter shouted, "Miss Thompson, how did you get the video?" Mira forced her voice through her fear. "Someone tried to give it to me. Someone who trusted that I would not ignore it. He has since disappeared. I hope he is found." Her words trembled but landed with an honesty no press training could replicate. Another reporter shouted, "Did you manipulate Mr. Wolfe?" A wave of anger tightened Mira's chest, but before she could speak, Adrian stepped in front of her. "No?" "She did nothing but show compassion when I had nothing left to hold on to. She asked for nothing. She gained nothing. She risked everything." The crowd erupted in overlapping questions again, but Adrian raised a hand once more. One final statement. He took a breath, his voice rich with something heavy and human. "Today, I announce the creation of the Lena Wolfe Foundation, fully funded and dedicated to supporting families affected by aerospace accidents, corporate negligence, and engineering failures." Mira's heart clenched. This mattered. This was justice becoming something tangible. Adrian continued. "The foundation will also fund medical assistance and scholarships, including one granted today to Mira Thompson, who will be pursuing a nursing degree beginning next fall." Mira froze, eyes widening in shock. She had never asked for that. Adrian looked at her gently. "You earned this." The crowd roared with questions again, but security began guiding them through the lobby toward a side exit. Outside, the cold air struck Mira's face sharp and grounding. Sirens echoed in the distance. Helicopters hovered above. The fall of Ethan Cole was national news. Adrian walked beside her but did not touch her, his presence warm despite the winter wind. Mira looked up at him, her breath clouding the air between them. "You did it," she whispered. "You told the world the truth." Adrian shook his head slowly. "No, we did." She swallowed. "What happens next?" He looked out over the chaotic street where cameras still flashed through barriers. "I face whatever comes. Lawsuits, fallout, resignations, damage control. But at least I face it without lies." He paused, eyes softening. "And you, Mira?" You go home to your mother. You let her rest easy knowing you were braver than anyone expected. Mira felt something warm and aching rise in her chest. Reporters still yelled from far behind barriers. Snowflakes drifted through the air, settling on her hair and lashes. Adrian studied her expression, noticing the exhaustion, the fear, the quiet strength. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for choosing to stand in that room, for speaking up, for surviving the last 24 hours with more courage than some people show in a lifetime." Mira exhaled shakily. "You really think I was brave?" Adrian looked at her fully, his eyes gentler than the first night she met him. "I know you were." He opened the SUV door for her. Mira paused, looking back at the building towering above them. Inside it, Lena's truth was still echoing, still teaching, still fighting through walls built of steel and silence. The giant had fallen. And in the rubble, something else was beginning. Something neither Mira nor Adrian could name yet. But it was real, and it was waiting. 1 year later, the world had changed in ways Mira could never have imagined. Winter returned to New York with the same quiet snowfall that had once wrapped a bar window in silver light, but Mira no longer worked double shifts or hurried through freezing nights with blistered hands. Instead, she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, adjusted the strap of her nursing school backpack, and stepped out of the hospital building where she had just finished her clinical rotation. Her breath rose in small clouds. She inhaled deeply, letting the cold bite her cheeks. She had grown used to this air, the kind of crisp winter that reminded her of survival. A year ago, she had been a waitress trying to keep the lights on in a cramped apartment. Now she wore scrubs with her name embroidered on them because someone had believed she was capable of a different future. Not Adrian. Herself. With help, yes, but she had walked every step. As she crossed the street, snowflakes clung to her eyelashes. City lights blurred into a soft glow. Everything around her felt familiar, yet renewed, as if the city had turned a page. Her phone dinged. A text from her mother. "Soup is ready, honey. Do not be late." Mira smiled. Her mother was stronger now, healthier than she had been in years. The foundation had helped with treatments, but the real healing came from peace, from the absence of fear and harassment and whispered threats. Life had slowed down just enough for them to breathe again. Still, something tugged at her thoughts as she continued walking. A memory, a voice, a question whispered in a bar. "Could you sit and talk with me just for 5 minutes?" For months after the press conference, Adrian had vanished from the public eye. Not entirely, there were interviews, statements, hearings, but he never turned it into a spectacle. He rebuilt the company's culture from the inside. He stepped down from some positions, stepped into others, and spent long stretches of time away from cameras. No more galas. No more interviews designed to feed wealth-centered narratives. He dedicated himself to the Lena Wolf Foundation, hosting engineering safety seminars, meeting quiet grieving families, visiting hospitals, funding projects in underfunded districts. He was not hiding. He was healing. But he never once reached out to Mira, not directly. He had given her distance with the same gentleness he offered truth. She had needed time to grow into her new life. He had needed time to understand his own. Mira admired that. And yet, tonight, Christmas Eve, once again she found herself drifting through East Village, turning down a small street dusted in snow, until she reached a corner marked by a flickering sign. Moonrise Tavern. She paused outside the window where warm, amber light glowed through the glass just as it had the first night she met him. Her heartbeat quickened, a soft ache blooming inside her chest. She told herself she was only passing by, that nostalgia was natural, that the human heart remembers places even more vividly than faces. She reached for the door. The familiar bell chimed softly as she stepped in. The bar looked almost exactly the same. Cinnamon in the air. Old Christmas songs playing, a few scattered customers, warm lights low and gentle. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking it in. Then she saw it. The booth. Their booth. The one where a man with red-rimmed eyes had asked for 5 minutes of human kindness. Except tonight, someone was already sitting there. Mira's breath caught. Adrian Wolf looked up from the notebook in front of him. glasses resting low on his nose, hair slightly tousled from melted snow. He stared at her with surprise. First, then, something softer, something warm, something like relief folding into his expression. "Mira," he said quietly, as if saying her name tasted familiar. She stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then she walked toward him, her steps light and hesitant. "You are here," she murmured. Adrian nodded once. "I come every year now." She blinked. "Every year? Christmas Eve?" "Yes." He swallowed, looking briefly at his hands. "It is where everything changed, where everything began again." Mira felt her chest tighten. She slid into the seat across from him, the same one she had taken a year ago, though everything between them now was different. Stronger. Clearer. He studied her scrubs, his eyes warming. "Nursing school is going well, I see." She smiled modestly. "I have not broken anything important yet, so yes." He laughed softly, and the sound curled through her like heat. She tilted her head. "And you look lighter." Adrian exhaled a slow breath. "I have been working. On myself. On the company. On stepping out of the shadows I built for too long." Mira nodded. "That suits you." Another quiet moment passed, the kind that felt peaceful, not awkward. Then Adrian spoke, his voice gentle but steady. "I wanted to reach out sooner. I almost did. Many times." She met his gaze. "Why did you not—" Adrian looked down at the table, then back at her. "Because you deserve time to become who you were meant to be without my grief pulling at your edges." Mira swallowed. "And who do you think I have become? Someone strong, someone compassionate, someone unafraid to sit with the truth even when it hurts, and someone whose voice helped change the course of my life." Her breath stilled. He took a slow breath. "Mira, may I ask you something?" She nodded, though her pulse fluttered. Adrian's voice softened into something familiar, something that wrapped around the moment like snow settling on warm ground. "Could you sit and talk with me for longer this time?" Mira felt her heart bloom warm and impossible and real. She smiled, the same soft smile she had given him a year ago, though now it carried something deeper, something not born of pity or coincidence but of choice. "I already saved you a seat," she whispered. Adrian's eyes softened with something that looked almost like peace. The world outside continued to snow, but inside the small bar the air settled into quiet warmth. Not passion, not urgency. Just two people meeting again in the exact place where they had once saved each other without realizing it. Mira rested her hands on the table. Adrian leaned forward slightly. And on that bench of a booth in the dim amber light of Christmas Eve, their stories which had once collided in chaos began to align gently, one breath at a time. Snow drifted lightly over the city like a soft lullaby as Mira and Adrian stepped out of Moonrise Tavern later that night. The streets were quieter now, holiday lights glowing warm against the dark sky. Mira pulled her scarf tighter and glanced up at Adrian beside her, noticing how the falling snow clung to his hair, how he did not seem bothered by the cold for once. He looked peaceful, as if the night itself had finally given him permission to breathe. They walked without urgency, their footsteps leaving twin patterns behind them on the sidewalk. Mira tucked her hands into her coat pockets. "I still cannot believe you come back here every Christmas Eve." Adrian gave a small, thoughtful smile. "I think I return because it reminds me that even in the worst moments, something unexpected can happen." Mira nudged him gently with her elbow. Like a stranger sitting down for 5 minutes, Adrian glanced at her and his voice softened. "Exactly like that." They turned the corner onto a quieter street lined with old brick apartments dusted in snow. Mira's breath clouded in front of her, slow and steady. Everything felt different now, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but quietly right. They had spent months apart growing, healing, rebuilding their own lives before stepping into each other's again. And that is what made this moment feel real. A warm yellow glow poured from the window of a small bakery at the end of the street. Adrian paused. "Are you hungry?" Mira blinked at the unexpected question. "Maybe a little." He nodded, as if that settled something inside him, and they walked toward the bakery. Inside, only one table was occupied by a couple laughing over hot chocolate. Mira and Adrian chose a booth near the window. A server brought them 2 mugs of cocoa topped with whipped cream. Mira warmed her hands around the mug. "You know," she said quietly, "if someone told me a year ago that my life would look like this now, I would have laughed." Adrian stirred his drink. "Or run out of the room." Mira grinned. "Or that." Adrian looked at her again, thoughtful, open. "You have changed a lot in a year." Mira shrugged lightly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just finally stopped surviving long enough to start living." Adrian's gaze softened. "I am glad you did." She felt her cheeks warm, though the bakery itself was cool enough that her breath still fogged. It had taken her time to understand that courage did not always look like standing in boardrooms. Sometimes it looked like sitting with someone who needed to be heard. Sometimes it looked like letting herself be happy again. Mira sipped her cocoa. "Did the foundation finish opening the new wing in Denver?" Adrian nodded. "Yesterday. They named it after Lena." Mira's expression softened with quiet respect. She would have liked that. He exhaled gently. "I think so." There was no ache in his voice now, only memory settled into a peaceful place. They sat in silence for a moment. Not empty silence, full comfortable, the kind that held space for both past and future. Adrian tapped his fingers lightly against the mug. "There is something I have wanted to ask you for a while." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Should I be nervous?" He shook his head. "No. Curious, maybe?" She leaned forward. "I am listening." He took a breath, steady and sincere. "That night in the bar, the night everything began. You gave me 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes changed both our lives." Mira felt her heartbeat quiet into something warm. Adrian continued. "We spend our days thinking big things change the world. Big decisions, big achievements. But sometimes it is just 5 minutes. 5 minutes of kindness. 5 minutes of listening. 5 minutes of courage." Mira nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "I think you are right." He met her gaze. "So, I wanted to ask you something." She tilted her head slightly. "Go on." Adrian's voice lowered, gentle but earnest. "Could we keep choosing 5 minutes at a time? Not rushing anything, not forcing anything, just giving ourselves time to grow into whatever this is." Her heart bloomed with something quiet and full. Mira smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "I would like that." He breathed out, relief flickering across his expression, a small miracle in itself. Snow outside thickened into a soft curtain, turning the bakery windows into glowing frames. Mira watched the snow for a moment, then turned back to Adrian. "Do you ever think about how strange it is that a billionaire and a waitress crossed paths that night?" He chuckled. "Life is strange." Mira shook her head. "No? I think life waits. I think it waits for the exact moment 2 people are ready to see each other." Adrian considered that, and then he nodded. "Maybe that is true." The bakery lights flickered slightly as someone adjusted decorations near the counter. Mira finished the last sip of her cocoa. Adrian slid his empty mug aside. "Walk you home." Mira nodded. "I would like that too." Outside, the snow brushed their coats in soft white specks. They walked slowly through the quiet streets, not holding hands but close enough that their shoulders brushed now and then. It was enough. Near Mira's apartment building, she paused on the steps. "Thank you for tonight." Adrian shrugged gently. "Thank you for showing up." After a moment, Mira said something she had held inside for a year. "I never regretted sitting down that night." Adrian's voice turned warm, "and I never stopped being grateful for it." She stepped back toward the door, then turned again. "You know, 5 minutes can save a lot." He smiled, soft, almost shy, filled with something she could not fully name yet. Then he whispered the words she remembered from the very beginning. "Sometimes 5 minutes is enough to save someone who seems unsavable." Mira felt something warm settle into place inside her. "Yes," she whispered back, "it is." And as the snow continued falling around them, coating the city in quiet white, the 5-minute miracle that had changed everything lingered in the air, not as the end of their story, but the beginning of the one. They would continue choosing together, one gentle moment at a time. If you are still here with me at this moment, then maybe this story reached a quiet corner of your heart the same way it did for me while writing it. Stories like this one are not really about billionaires or scandals or snowy Christmas nights. They are about the 5 minutes we give to people who need them. 5 minutes that can change a life. 5 minutes that can become a miracle. So, before you go, let me ask you something, the same question that sits at the center of this story. Have you ever given someone 5 minutes that changed everything? Or maybe you were the one saved by them. Maybe it was a stranger who asked if you were okay at the right moment. Maybe it was a friend who sat beside you when the world felt too heavy. Maybe it was a small act of kindness you barely remember, but your heart does. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something warm or hopeful tonight, I want to invite you to do 3 simple things for me and for our little storytelling family here. First, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I love seeing our community spread across cities, states, countries, strangers bound together through a single story. Are you watching from Texas, California, New York, London, Trinidad? Let me know. Second, tell me your answer to this question. What is one 5-minute moment you will never forget? It can be tender, funny, heartbreaking, or hopeful. Your story might be the one that someone else out there needs to hear tonight. And third, if this story made you feel something, if it brought comfort or warmth, or even just 5 quiet minutes of escape, please consider giving this video a like. It helps the channel more than you know and tells YouTube to share these stories with more people searching for a bit of hope. If you are new here, welcome to the family. I am Emma, and every week we dive into stories that remind us that love, courage, and unexpected miracles often grow from the smallest human moments. So, if you want more stories like this, stories that heal, stories that comfort, stories that help you feel seen, make sure you subscribe and turn on the little bell so you never miss the next chapter. Before you go, I want to leave you with one last thought. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for a miracle, but sometimes the miracle is simply sitting down for 5 minutes and letting yourself be human with someone else. Thank you for spending your 5 minutes and more with me tonight. I will see you in the next story. Leave your location in the comments. I am reading them all.